Welcome, everyone. My name is Dawn Mullally, and I am the CPAS Communications Manager. And this position affords me the pleasure of working with our many wonderful scientists, like our guest speaker today. I'm delighted to have you attend the CPAS Discovery Seminar Series. CPAS scientists do everything from explore our ocean depths to fly into hurricanes to heliophysicists modeling coronal mass ejections and those who unravel the mysteries of the Arctic. And we want to share this great research with the public, the NCAR UCAR community, and our many colleagues at universities and agencies across the globe. Just to orient you, we will be using Slido so that you can post questions to our speaker. You will be able to find a tab for this in the top left of the screen, and later a QR code will appear as well. Today, it is my sincere pleasure to introduce to you today's our speaker, Dr. Emily Rountree. Emily serves as program specialist as part of a unique collaborative position between UCAR-CPAESS, NOAA's Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program, and the Mid-America Regional Council in Kansas City. She is responsible for facilitating the incorporation of relevant research findings and analysis into a range of planning, decision-making, and preparedness activities in the Kansas City metropolitan area and more broadly across the four states of Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska. Emily will discuss several initiatives she's developed, building on existing structures and community identified needs. Today, Emily will be speaking on federal to local partnership, collaborations as we adapt to future climate risk in the central Midwest. Emily, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Dawn. I am very excited to be here with you all today and to share a little bit about this really unique collaboration and position that I've been able to lead. Next slide, please. So today we're going to be talking about federal to local partnership collaborations as we adapt to future climate risk in the central Midwest. So we are talking about how we take these very large structures and in climate work and how they get played out in the on the ground. Next slide, please. So I am a climate adaptation partnerships specialist. So I'm over the central Midwest. I'm over, as Dawn mentioned, I'm over Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. And my position is a unique collaboration and structure between the NOAA Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program, the Mid-America Regional Council of Kansas City, and the UCAR.CPAESS team. So the NOAA CAP program, the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program, is all about working with communities and local decision makers as they deal with multiple climate hazards. So flooding, extreme heat, water shortages, wildfires, big weather events. So the traditional structure of the NOAA CAP program is to fund large university-led teams. So the traditional 5-year, $5 million grant that we see that is all over those 4 states. And there are different regional CAP teams around the country. So there had not been a regional CAP team here in the Central Midwest prior. And so my position was created individually and separate from one of those teams to help expand the NOAA CAP program into the Central Midwest. And so to do that, NOAA CAP partnered with the Mid-America Regional Council to house my position in Kansas City. So MARC is the municipal planning organization and council of governments for Kansas City, which is the 119 cities and 9 counties that make up the entire Kansas City metro region. And so I also get to be on a climate team there and have a home base for local support. The UCAR.CPAESS team also supports the position by being my home for HR and my goals and performance. And I get to do really wonderful things like speak to you all today. And I think it's really important to note that that NOAA CAP also set up this partnership in with a couple other mentors. So I have Mark as my support, I have UCAR as my support, and I have two other mentors. One is the former, recently retired NOAA Climate Services Director for the High Plains, and then another urban planning professor at the University of Kansas. So this structure really gives me a good support as I go and do partnership development and capacity building in the Central Midwest. Next slide, please. So to give you a little bit of background on the organizational structure, so we are housed in the Climate Program Office as part of the Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Line. If you are familiar with what has been going on nationally, the OAR research line was under threat of being defunded and redispersed throughout the rest of NOAA. That has not happened. And actually, you know, these things are happening on a day-to-day basis. There's actually an OAR all hands meeting this afternoon where I think we'll learn a little bit more since the government reopened, but that's where we are organizationally. Next slide. So the Climate Program Office is all about communication and education and research and partnerships as part of that OAR line. And their job is to translate climate science to practice on the ground. So for and with communities and with the public, very much like the reason that UCP was created. So the CAP program was developed as a link between the climate science and the decision makers and the local leaders so they can all better understand climate and plan for climate hazards. So again, I just think it's a really smart and strategic partnership with UCP and addresses the real need for further connection and collaboration in the Central Midwest as we face increased climate change. Next slide, please. So the CAP program, so we generally regard ourselves as a social science structure within NOAA. So we work with multiple decision makers together. So it just kind of gives you a little bit of our background. A lot of us are human dimensions people, anthropologists. I mean, there's climate science people. There's all sorts of different multidisciplinary science that comes together to make this program run. Next slide, please. So this kind of gives you a picture of where those CAP programs are. You can see our Central Midwest one there. Those of you in Colorado are part of the Western Water Assessment team. We've got one in Hawaii, one in Alaska, and hopefully there were plans before this year to expand into Central Appalachia and the northern Northeast, but we will see what happens with planning. I think right now, again, we're taking things day by day, but as of this point, we are still running as a program, and the Central Midwest team is going strong. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the Mid-America Regional Council too. I mentioned that they're over the 119 cities. So one of the reasons why my position was housed at the Mid-America Regional Council was because they wanted, NOAA was really interested in me working with local governments specifically, and they have really, really good ties to local governments throughout the Kansas City region. So they not only do all this climate environment work, they also run the Head Start program, and they do senior services, and they run the 911 center for the city. So they're really connected throughout the city. And my mentor, the environment director at the Mid-America Regional Council, has been doing this type of work in Kansas City for over 30 years and is extremely, extremely well connected. And so I get to kind of ride the coattails of the work that he has and the partnerships that he's been able to put together. Next slide. Okay, so what is this work that I have been set out to do? So my position is the third of its kind, and I'm here to help advance climate adaptation in the region. So at its core, my position is all about partnership development and capacity building, and to generally increase the interconnectedness around climate adaptation throughout the 4 states. I support a wide range of practitioners and researchers and professionals in their efforts and goals and planning. I work with planners in a way that I never have before. My background is in higher education and community engagement, so I'm learning a lot about government planning, and I use those multiple teams to guide my work and collaboration. Next slide, please. Okay, so what do we mean when we talk about future climate risk in the Central Midwest? So we talk about increased heat, drought, severe storms, and flooding, and there's a really high variability of those impacts happening within short distances. So from county to county, you can have drought and flooding happening right next to each other, and the local leaders have to deal with those things simultaneously. So our region is also we're known for our storms in the first place, and they are getting stronger and more damaging. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So in Iowa in 2020, and this did not get very much press because there were other things happening in the world at the time. There was a derecho that ripped through Nebraska, Iowa, and Illinois, with the majority of the damage happening in Iowa. So in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, 140-mile winds uprooted about 70% of the city's trees. So, I mean, just 100-year-old trees just ripped right out of their roots. And so in the surrounding areas, the storm did $11 billion worth of damage to cities and crops and agricultural infrastructure. There was an officer from a local utility company there that likened the storm to a 40-mile wide tornado that rolled over 100 miles of the state. It was really, really devastating. So also when it comes to doing climate adaptation work in these 4 states, there's a slightly different conversation that's happening between the rural spaces and the urban. So in the rural context, we're talking about things like nitrogen levels in the soil and pesticide runoff and water quality and crop disease and drought. And in an urban context, so like here in Kansas City, we're talking more about things like energy efficiency in buildings and transportation impacts and infrastructure challenges with flooding and stormwater management, urban canopy with heat. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of our climate context. So our program, the Climate Adaptation Partnerships Program, specifically works with climate justice and frontline communities. So I'm going to give you an example of an event that happened this past May, and I'll show you a bit of a video. So this past May, a tornado touched down in urban St. Louis, and it damaged 20 miles of the urban areas in the city, and it caused approximately $1.5 billion in damage, which is one of the highest figures that for a single tornado on record. It went through the same neighborhood where Michael Ferguson was shot in 2014 and where all that unrest was there. And it's just a really tough situation for the neighborhoods, and they will be dealing with the consequences of this for a long time. So next slide, we'll see the video. And before we press play, a little bit about this. This video was put together by a nonprofit organization out of Kansas City, actually, called Kansas City Defender. They were realizing that a lot of the nonprofits that serve this area were very much on the ground, working tirelessly to help the folks. And so they went to St. Louis to help document the aftermath of the tornado and to bring attention to what was going on. Okay, now I can play.
At 2:41 p.m., a funnel cloud touches down near South Hanley and Richmond Heights, and the tornado begins its trek. By 2:43 p.m., the twister has grown to nearly a mile wide. Businesses near North Kings Highway Boulevard and Del Mar taking a direct hit.
Dozens more injured after a tornado swept through St. Louis.
Rescue crews trying to save a man trapped in the basement.
The city admits the sirens did not sound.
About 5,000 properties were hit by the storm. A little girl tell her mom, "Mom, I want to go home." And the mom responded, "We don't have a home."
St. Louis has recently become an epicenter of the global climate collapse. The once-in-a-century tornado struck, inciting mass destruction and transforming this bustling black city into a real-life war zone.
A little bit, we on Marcus and Dr. Martin Luther King right now.
I know you're scared. Come here, baby. Hi. Oh my God.
Just a bad day all around. These people went through a lot.
Winds screamed at 152 miles per hour, carving a 23-mile scar across the city, shredding more than 5,000 structures, flattening entire blocks, and killing a still unconfirmed number of mostly black elders, and hundreds more people were displaced. The funnel followed the color line, obliterating predominantly black neighborhoods that the city had already starved for a century. In the immediate aftermath, there was local news coverage, but minimal national reporting. And now, 2 months later, the news has virtually vanished. But people are still without food, without water. Some people are sleeping under tarps and shattered beams in this ongoing
catastrophe was his last word. So obviously he has a very, very poignant perspective. But I thought it was important to show that we know that there is climate injustice happening throughout the world. And we generally don't think about the Midwest as being a central place for major climate change effects. But it is really increasing, and the importance of doing this work in this region is just becoming more and more apparent. Next slide, please. So I'm going to kind of shift the tone into a different direction. So we kind of learned a little bit about the doom and gloom of what's going on in our region, but I think it's important to share that as a partnerships specialist, I have a very specific partnership approach. So when I work with communities and when I work with nonprofit organizations and governments, I carry this sort of philosophy with me, and it's something that I've been doing, since early on in my career, and has been really served me well when developing relationships. So I take an appreciative, asset-based approach. There's a lot of literature out there about this type of approach for partnerships, but I really like this quote, and it says, "The cooperative, co-evolutionary search for the best in people, their organizations, and the world around them. It involves a systemic discovery of what gives life to an organization or a community when it is most effective and most capable in economic, ecological, and human terms." So when I work with partners and when I work with organizations, I tend to take the questioning line of, so what is working with your organization? What works the best? How do you measure success? What are the best things that have happened to you recently? And then that way they can really focus on the positive and shine. But also in those types of conversations, you can start to hear some of the things that they're like, "Oh, well, I wish that this was better." And so it's really served me well. Next slide, please. Just to share a couple of characteristics of effective partnerships, there is also a lot of literature out there about this. I look for mutuality in decision making. So, is it a mutually beneficial type of relationship, collaboration, and what that means, and how what good collaboration looks like. There's ongoing communication, regular evaluation and assessment. So are we meeting our goals together? That sort of thing. and relationship building anchored in trust, respect, and balance of power. So the power balance is really important, particularly when we're working with these larger structured organizations like higher education and like UCAR. And so there's this sort of large kind of powerful entity working with frontline communities. If you are doing community engaged research or want to do community engaged research or are looking to learn more about it, I would love to promote a particular training. So, so you know how we do human subjects training, the city training, when we do research with human subjects. So there's the general city human subjects training that we all do. But then there's also the city has an additional add-on training that you can do that's specific for community engaged research and community-based research. So you can ask your research folks if they have that. I was at the University of Kansas prior to this, and one of the goals that we had was when folks were putting in their IRB application. So, this is the research that I want to do. Here's what it's going to all, what the plan is. There was a checkbox that said, does this involve doing research with community? And if they checked yes, then we had them do this additional training. So it's just a really, really good, succinct way to get some training under your belt for community engaged research and working with communities. Next slide. Okay, so I am just started the second year, or I'm 2 years into my position. And when I started this position, there were a lot of different directions that I could take. It was a new position, it hadn't been done before. So now I'm going to talk about 3 projects that I've developed that I'm hoping is advancing climate adaptation in our region. So I've developed all of these based on community identified need. So like I said, I have a background in community engagement and higher education, and something that I'm passionate about is working alongside and with communities and getting that input throughout. So these are projects that I have been born from things that I've heard from the community that would help advance their goals. Next slide, please. So the first project is to support climate-related data with local governments. So like I said, one of the reasons that my position was housed at the Mid-America Regional Council was because NOAA would like me to work with local governments and municipalities. And so when I started the position, in order to begin to uncover some of those community needs, I conducted a series of semi-structured interviews with the cities and counties' sustainability directors or equivalent position thereof, long-range planners or some, but whoever's in charge of doing the sustainability, climate, environment work with the city. And so I began to get to know them and understand the context and what we could do together. So from these conversations, I just kept hearing over and over again that they continually need to prove the climate work and prove the worth of the climate work to their city's leadership. So in light of competing priorities and challenging political climates, which we know is a thing in the Midwest. So there's just a need to tell the story better, and specifically in terms of data and economic benefits. So I have a relationship with the Kansas Data Science Consortium from my previous position. So when I was at KU. So the Kansas Data Science Consortium is a group of faculty from KU, K-State, Wichita State, and a few other community colleges throughout Kansas. And they have students take on problems submitted by community partners and work on them throughout the semester. So they essentially have like a statewide service learning effort for data science, which I think is very cool. So I helped put out the call to the cities for projects and ended up facilitating this partnership between the Kansas Data Science Consortium and the first ones that jumped on board were Lincoln, Nebraska, and the city of Kansas City, Missouri, and to be able to submit their projects and then move forward, but maybe what they might not have been able to otherwise. So I'll talk a little bit about their projects. So Lincoln wants to create a climate impact decision-making tool. So for example, if the city wants to build a new pool, they can put in all the specifications for their city specifically, and then tell them the climate impacts of that decision. And so students are helping them develop that, so they can help make better decisions when it comes to what they're doing in the city and how that impacts the climate. For Kansas City, so Kansas City already has a fairly decent climate data capacity. They actually have a position dedicated to it. So they wanted to work with the students to be able to expand that capacity and get data more organized and from multiple sources. So when I hear the data science people talk about this is one of the things about being a partnerships person, is that I identify how people can work together, and then sometimes their expertise align, but mine doesn't. So they are able to work together really well on that. But as far as like all of the acronyms that they use for data science, as long as they understand each other, that's all that I care about. Okay, so those projects are underway, and we are soliciting new cities for this next year. Okay, next slide. So this next project I am very excited about, and actually launched last week. I'm doing a speaker series called the Central Midwest Adaptation Conversation. It uses short lightning talks from 4 speakers for each session. So the series really is intended to spark connections and overlaps and cross-sector partnership exploration in the Central Midwest. There was a program at KU that I modeled this after, and it was really good at sparking multidisciplinary collaboration. So I thought it would be a really good model to bring into this context. And so in this context too, I mean, we're bringing together speakers from nonprofit and government and private sector and higher education, and throughout all, like geographically throughout all of 4 states, over a variety of topics in climate adaptation. So each session gives a really dynamic look at that topic with various perspectives. So I'm really hoping that it will help strengthen bonds and adaptation practices in Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri, because we confront very similar climate vulnerabilities and are adapting to a very similar future climate risk. So I'll give you a couple examples of what you'll hear in these talks. So remember that 2020 derecho in Iowa that I mentioned? So for example, in the Resilience Hubs session, I'll have their emergency management department on, talk about how they're creating mobile resilience hubs. So they're calling them rapid response trailers. Or rapid recovery trailers. So they're converting trailers to be outfitted to deploy and assist people in the aftermath of extreme weather. So rapid recovery trailers. So they're fully equipped with like charging stations and pop-up tents and heaters and misters and radios and solar panels and internet generators. It's a really incredible project. And one of the goals of this speaker series that I'm putting together is that we can learn. So these rapid recovery trailers are in a reactive response to the devastation that they experience. So hopefully other folks in our region can learn from what people have experienced and how they are problem solving, so that they don't have to have the same the same type of response as before, and are better equipped and adapted. So my first talk was on supporting rural and small cities. And I had like the Native Communities Associate from the Center for Rural Affairs. I had a city manager who was he was a city manager for Hays, Kansas, Boonville, Missouri, Lawrence, Kansas. I mean, he really did a lot of work in small cities around the region. But specifically in Hays, Kansas, there's a really interesting and really forward-thinking adaptation project happening there. So Hays, Kansas is in central Kansas. They are not west enough, or they're not west enough to be able to get their water from the Ogallala Aquifer, and they're not east enough to experience some of the rains that we have in eastern Kansas, like in Kansas City. So they are in a really tough spot for drought. So in the early 90s, when they started realizing how drought vulnerable they were, they bought a ton of land just south of them and started to do a lot of groundwater work and rain catchment, and so they kept expanding. So so they've got this kind of water resource to them as well as doing a lot of regulations for the city. So they have really strict. It's almost like being in Australia, if you're familiar with any of the Australian water regulations that they have about watering lawn and how much you can use for personal use and that sort of thing. So I think it's a really forward for central Kansas. I think it's a really forward thinking project, and it is a really good example of adaptation in the Central Midwest. So I've got really great centers that are throughout all 4 states on these. So there's another one next month on frontline communities, and then the rest are in development for 2026. Next slide. So my last project that I'll talk to you about is I'm conducting a qualitative analysis of the climate action and adaptation plans in my region that cities and local governments have developed and adopted. There are, 16 of them in the 4-state region. I'm working with the Central Midwest NOAA CAP team out of the University of Iowa. So I'm working with one of their grad students and an urban planning professor there. So I've consulted with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network of the Heartland, the Mid-America Regional Council, and individual planners to make sure that the project meets their needs, because the goal is to create connections between cities and to draw common themes and to identify innovative solutions and I really want to provide a space for cities to look to in their own efforts to move their own plans forward, and also help cities that don't have plans yet help identify what might work best for them if they would like to create their own climate plan. So I'm looking forward to this. We've gotten some good feedback from planners throughout the region. What we're working on is the best outcome or output for this. So what would be most useful for planners? Okay, next slide. So my position is a 3-year position. Like I said, I just started year 2. My biggest goal for my own outcome in this 3 years is that when my 3 years is complete, there are more connections and a more interrelated adaptive Midwest. I had the wonderful opportunity of doing the UCAR Board of Trustees science talk last month. And the very first question I was asked was, how are you measuring and assessing your outcomes? And I said, that's a good question. Most of the feedback that I'm getting is from more informal conversations with partners. I'm shifting my work as I go along based on what I'm learning. But if this is also something that I would like to turn back to the audience for feedback from, because this is something that I would love to know the thoughts of what you all think would be a good assessment and outcome from the work that I'm doing here. So here are just some examples. So I will have brought together students and government projects goals are advanced with the adaptation conversation. By the time that it's all complete, will have been 40 presenters. We had 30 attendees for the first session, and that was just through word of mouth of the presenters helping me spread the word. And a very good mix of higher education and government and nonprofit and private folks even came. So I think that's a good measure of success for my work as well. And for the qualitative analysis, I'm getting those students engaged. I would really like to publish with the students. And like I said, I'm workshopping potential outcomes of what that project will look like, whether it is an actual workshop, or story map, something like that. But again, I would love feedback from you all about how to measure success in this type of position, because it is new, and like I said, my main goal is that when I'm finished, there are things in place that weren't before me and that can continue on after I'm gone, or moved on, not going, moved on professionally. Okay, next slide, please. And of course, I cannot do any of this work without the incredible partnerships that I've developed over the last years. And these are just a few examples. I do feel very fortunate to be able to spearhead this type of position in the Central Midwest. I have heard from so many partners that it's really important and unique and really needed in our region. And it's just a really great example of how federal and regional and local entities can work together to enact real change on the ground through positions like these. And so I would also like to advocate for more of them. Next slide, please. And if you would like to register for the first session of my speaker, or the second session of my speaker series, the registration there is on the page. I don't know how if these are shared out, but I can, if you email me there, I can also get you the registration link if you're interested in attending. And with that, thank you for your time. I am looking forward to your questions and discussion, and I appreciate the opportunity to do this presentation with you all.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us, Emily. We really, truly appreciate it. Now we will begin the Q&A session of today's seminar. I'd like to direct everyone's attention to Slido to ask your questions either with this QR code or the tab in the upper left corner of your screen. And while you are formulating your questions, I would like to invite you to check out our webpage, cpaess.ucar.edu, for upcoming seminars. Our next scheduled seminar is after the holidays on Wednesday, February 18th, 2026 at 11 a.m. Mountain Time with Mike Mueller, CPAESS project scientist who works with NOAA's Quantitative Observing System Assessment Program. We would also invite you to find this talk and all of our past talks on CPASS's YouTube channel. Okay, we have a question from Martha. What have you found to be some of the best practices in the Midwest in dealing with climate change?
Sure. So of course, I think my initial response is not a surprise. In places where they are interconnected. So there is a really strong fabric of people who are working on this together. You see it in Kansas City, you see it in Iowa City, you see it in Lincoln. I mean, there are really good examples of places that there are people from those different sectors working together, and that's where it's tending to be moved forward more easily. I also think that there have been a lot of success in places where the local governments are able to move things forward. Like the governments themselves are more receptive to climate work. The state politics in our region are complicated. And so if the cities themselves are able to move work forward, we've seen a lot of success with that. Sometimes in spite of state politics, there are some state entities that are doing really good work. Kansas just hired a water specialist. The Missouri Department of Natural Resources is doing some great work. Those are state entities, but from what I've seen, at the local level, that's where things move the most.
So let me just ask you, I was surprised. I'm originally from the Midwest, and I was surprised when I looked at the IPCC report. And I think the last time I checked, the Midwest had the highest variability projected compared to anywhere else in the mainland US, at least, 6 degrees in either direction, which is crazy. Um, so, given those kind of extremes that people are dealing with, is there any programs? Like, have you seen anything like? I know the Midwest is a breadbasket of the U.S. Where farmers are kind of trying to get together and saying, "Hey, these seeds work better. They deal with the climate variability better." Or if we kind of like use this kind of drainage techniques on our farm. They help save crop. Have you seen anything in that?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So my colleagues, the NOAA team in Iowa would be able to answer this question more fully, but I will try to talk about the great work that they're doing and the organizations that they work with. So one of the things that the NOAA team does in Iowa is support women landowners. So individual land ownership is the vast majority of land management throughout our 4 states, or they're managed by individual landowners, right? So throughout Iowa and Nebraska, the CAP team are bringing together women landowners for those specific reasons, to share best practices, to share what they're seeing, and support women landowners specifically. There are so many organizations out there, and the farmers know what's happening to their land. They know that things are blooming, and producing at different times. They know that the water patterns are erratic and getting more extreme. So yes, to what extent, in which states and how so, I don't have a full pulse on that. There is actually, for the frontline communities talk next week. There's an organization, or it's an NSF funded project in Kansas. It's a Kansas EPSCoR project. It's called ARISE. It's called the Adaptation, or Adaptive and Resilient Infrastructures Driven by Social Equity is the acronym. But they work to support energy, water, and transportation throughout Kansas. And they just did a huge survey of Kansas landowners and community members on water specifically. And so I'll get more results on that next month. But again, I think that collaboration and communication of good practices in agriculture is going to be vital for our country. I mean, we feed a good portion of the country, and food and water and all of those things are essential for our survival. So the more we talk about it and the more we get together about it, the better.
Excellent. I please feel free to put in your questions, anyone, if you're thinking about stuff. But if you don't mind, Emily, I'm just going to keep quizzing you. So you showed us footage from the news of the devastating a tornado that hit St. Louis. Do you know if any cities in the Midwest that you're working with are trying to do any kind of adaptation or mitigation efforts in terms of like rebuilding and stuff like that? Like any subsidies like to kind of make things a little bit safer for people as they, or any regulations as new communities are built in the Midwest, like, hey, we can see this is going to be an issue. We will, give you a little bit of funding if you do this because it will make your home or your business that you're building a little bit more stable in light of the climate changes that we see are coming.
Sure. So I'll speak to Kansas City because I know that context the best. So right now, Kansas City has I think they've just completed overhauled stormwater management plan. So a lot of our infrastructure for the city was built, 50 to 100 years ago plus. So it's just not holding up. We have very clayey soil and a lot of clay pipes, and things are just kind of not keeping up. I think that with the stormwater, I mean, there have been storms. There was a tornado that ripped through my neighborhood. I'm in a suburb of Kansas City last year. So the stormwater is a big deal in the flooding. Like the storms rip through, and I lived in the East Coast, and it looks like a hurricane. We get a lot of water very quickly. So I think that's a good step to recognize that our stormwater management needs an overhaul and needs some help. At a local residential level, there are programs in my county that promote planting native gardens and planting trees and permeable surfaces and rain barrels and things like that. So that's just, but they're not really taking advantage of all that much, in suburban Kansas City. There's a lot of green lawns and all of that. But so I think that there is some infrastructure to get there. I think that there are a lot of people working hard on that. But man, things are changing real fast. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
It sounds like it's very like at the beginnings of a lot of ways where it's really we need community building,
right.
that you're starting these conversations, you're connecting people so that they can start hatching plans depending on what the issue is most pressing to, which is super, super important. And that kind of groundwork can't be underestimated at all.
I just accepted to serve on the committee to plan the Kansas City Climate Summit for this next year. And it's put on by the Climate Action KC. The organization was put together by a number of elected officials around the city that said we need to get together on climate. And so it's just I think it's 4 years old, and we're up to I think there were like 500 people that were capped, but I think that there were like 700 people who wanted to come. And so we're expanding it this year. It's going to be a multi-day thing. There is a lot of energy. I mean, same thing, happening in Cedar Rapids and in Iowa City. And I mean, there's a lot. And even Springfield, Missouri, which is very politically different than, even the rest of the Midwest. And so I think that there's a lot of recognition that work needs to be done, and the wheels are turning.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I appreciate you pointing out that even though there's political differences, like folks like farmers, they see it. They know that land. They know their land inside and out.
right,
And they see it, and it has nothing to do with politics. It just has to do with what's happening.
exactly.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I don't know that we have any more questions for today, but I really appreciate your talk very much, Emily. I know we all do. I think it's so wonderful, especially for an organization that UCAR and NCAR that does a lot of like research, see how this is kind of then applied into the real world and the public kind of gets like these enhanced benefits by the bridges that people like you create. So thank you so very much.
Well, thank you so much, John.
Um, let's see. For everyone else, thank you for coming to the UCAR-CPAESS Discovery Seminar. And remember that you can go to our website to find out about future talks at cpass.ucar.edu. And you will be able to find a link to this talk once it's uploaded onto YouTube. Emily, our sincere thanks to you for sharing your important work with us. Also, thank you so much, Jesse of UCAR Multimedia Services and Alex Meyer of CPAS for their invaluable assistance, even though it's quiet and in the background. And I hope to see everyone at our next Discovery seminar. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.